that was really just a big driver. It's, you know, you talk about lots of other reasons to do the work you're doing, but fundamentally, you want to think about the future and not think that it sucks.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in general, you know, there's a lot of discussion of like this problem or that problem, and a lot of people are sad about the future and that they're pessimistic, and I think this is not great. I mean, we really want to wake up in the morning and look forward to the future. We want to be excited about what's going to happen, and life cannot simply be about sort of solving one miserable problem after another.
So if you look forward 30 years, you know, this year, the year 2050 has been labeled by scientists as this kind of almost like this doomsday deadline on climate. There's a consensus of scientists, a large consensus of scientists who believe that if we haven't completely eliminated greenhouse gases or offset them completely by 2050, effectively we're inviting climate catastrophe. Do you believe there is a pathway to avoid that catastrophe, and what would it look like?
Yeah. So, I am not one of the doomsday people, which may surprise. I actually think we're on a good path, but at the same time, I want to caution against complacency. So long as we are not complacent, as long as we have a high sense of urgency about moving towards a sustainable energy economy, then I think things will be fine. So I can't emphasize that enough. So long as we push hard and are not complacent, the future's going to be great. Don't worry about it. I mean, worry about it, but if you worry about it, ironically, it will be a self-unfulfilling prophecy. So, like, there are three elements to a sustainable energy future. One is obviously sustainable energy generation, which is primarily wind and solar. There's also hydro, geothermal. I'm actually pro-nuclear. I think nuclear is fine. But it's going to be primarily solar and wind as the primary generators of energy. The second part is you need batteries to store the solar and wind energy, because the sun doesn't shine all the time, the wind doesn't blow all the time. So you need a lot of stationary battery packs. And then you need electric transport. So electric cars, electric planes, boats. And then ultimately, it's not really possible to make electric rockets, but you can make the propellant used in rockets using sustainable energy.
Right.
So ultimately, we can have a fully sustainable energy economy, and it's those three things: solar, wind, stationary battery pack, electric vehicles. So then, what are the limiting factors on progress? The limiting factor really will be battery cell production. So that's gonna really be the fundamental rate driver, and then whatever the slowest element of the whole lithium-ion battery cells supply chain, from mining and the many steps of refining to ultimately creating a battery cell and putting it into a pack, that will be the limiting factor on progress towards sustainability.
All right, so we need to talk more about batteries, because the key thing that I want to understand, like, there seems to be a scaling issue here that is kind of amazing and alarming. You have said that you have calculated that the amount of battery production that the world needs for sustainability is 300 terawatt hours of batteries.
That's
That's the end goal.
Very rough numbers, and I certainly would invite others to check our calculations, because they may arrive at different conclusions. But in order to transition not just current electricity production, but also heating and transport, which roughly triples the amount of electricity that you need, it amounts to approximately 300 terawatt hours of installed capacity.
So we need to give people a sense of how big a task that is. I mean, here we are at the Gigafactory. You know, this is one of the biggest buildings in the world. What I've read, and tell me if this is still right, is that the goal here is to eventually produce 100 gigawatt hours of batteries here a year.
We'll probably do
eventually.
more than that, but yes, that's hopefully we get there within a couple of years.
Right. But I mean, that is
Point 1 terawatt hours.
but that's still 1/100th of what's needed. How much of the rest of that 100 is Tesla planning to take on between, let's say, between now and 2030, 2040, when we really need to see the scale up happen?
I mean, these are just guesses. I mean, so please, people shouldn't hold me to these things. It's not like this is like some. What tends to happen is I'll make some like best guess, and then people will, in 5 years there'll be some jerk that writes an article. Elon said this would happen, and it didn't happen. He's a liar and a fool. It's very annoying when that happens. So these are just guesses. This is a conversation.
Right.
I think Tesla probably ends up doing 10% of that, roughly. Yes.
Let's say 2050, we have this amazing, 100% sustainable electric grid made up of, some mixture of the
Yeah.
sustainable energy sources you talked about. That same grid probably is offering the world really low cost energy, isn't it, compared with now? And,
Yeah.
and I'm curious about, like, are people entitled to get a little bit excited about the possibilities of that world?
People should be optimistic about the future. Humanity will solve sustainable energy. It will happen. If we are, continue to push hard, the future is bright and good from an energy standpoint. And then it will be possible to also use that energy to do carbon sequestration. It takes a lot of energy to pull carbon out of the atmosphere, because in putting it in the atmosphere, it released energy. So now,
Right.
well, obviously, in order to pull it out, you need to use a lot of energy. But if you've got a lot of sustainable energy from wind and solar, you can actually sequester carbon, so you can reverse the CO2 parts per million of the atmosphere and oceans. And also, you can really have as much fresh water as you want. Earth is mostly water. We should call Earth water. It's 70% water by surface area. Now, most of that's seawater, but it's like, we just happen to be on the bit that's land.
Right. And with energy, you can turn seawater into
Yes.
irrigating water or
Yes.
whatever water you need.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
At very low cost. Things will be good.
Things will be good.
Yes. Things will be
And
good.
also, there's other benefits, right, to this non-fossil fuel world where the air is cleaner and
Yes, exactly.
yeah.
Because like when you burn fossil fuels, there's all these like side reactions and toxic gases of various kinds, and like sort of little particulates that are bad for your lungs. Like there's all sorts of bad things that are happening that will go away,
Okay.
and the sky will be cleaner and quieter. The future's going to be good.
I want us to switch now to think a bit about artificial intelligence. But the segue there, you mentioned how annoying it is when people haul you up for bad predictions in the past. So I'm possibly going to be annoying now. But I'm curious about
Yeah.
your timelines and how you predict and how come some things are so amazingly on the money and some aren't. So when it comes to predicting sales of Tesla vehicles, for example, I mean, you've kind of been amazing. I think in 2014, when Tesla had sold that year 60,000 cars, you said, 2020, I think we will do 500,000 a year.
Yeah, we did almost exactly 500,000.
You did almost exactly 500,000. You were scoffed in 2014 because no one
Yeah.
since Henry Ford with the Model T had come close to that kind of growth rate
Yes.
for cars. You were scoffed, and you actually hit 500,000 cars and
Yeah.
510,000 or whatever produced. But 5 years ago, last time you came to TED, I asked you about full self-driving, and you said, yep, this very year, I am confident that we will have a car going from LA to New York without any intervention.
Yeah, I don't want to blow your mind, but I'm not always right.
But so what's the difference between those two? Why has full self-driving in particular been so hard to predict?
I mean, the thing that really got me, and I think is going to get a lot of other people, is that there are just so many false dawns with self-driving, where you think you got the problem, have a handle on the problem, and then it turns out you just hit a ceiling, because if you were to plot the progress, the progress looks like a log curve. So it's like a series of log curves. So most people don't know what a log curve is, I suppose, but
Show the shape.
it goes up sort of a fairly straight way, and then it starts tailing off, and you start
And there's a kind of O-shaped
getting
bump.
diminishing returns. And you're like, it was trending up, and now it's sort of curving over and you start getting to these what I call local maxima, where you don't realize basically how dumb you were. And then it happens again. So, ultimately, these things in retrospect they seem obvious, but in order to solve full self-driving properly, you have to solve real-world AI. Because you say, like, what are the road networks designed to work with? They're designed to work with a biological neural net, our brains, and with vision, our eyes. And so in order to make it work with computers, you basically need to solve real-world AI and vision. Because we need cameras and silicon neural nets in order to have self-driving work for a system that was designed for eyes and biological neural nets. I guess when you put it that way, it's sort of like quite obvious that the only way to solve full self-driving is to solve real-world AI and sophisticated vision.
What do you feel about the current architecture? Do you think you have an architecture now where there is a chance for the logarithmic curve not to tail off any time soon?
Well, I mean, admittedly, these may be an infamous last words, but I actually am confident that we will solve it this year. That we will exceed. You say, like, what the probability of an accident? At what point do you exceed that of the average person?
Right.
I think we will exceed that this year.
What are you seeing behind the scenes that gives you that confidence?
We're almost at the point where we have a high-quality unified vector space. Like in the beginning, we were trying to do this with image recognition on individual images. But if you look at one image out of a video, it's actually quite hard to see what's going on without ambiguity. But if you look at a video segment of a few seconds of video, that ambiguity resolves. So the first thing we had to do was sort of tie all 8 cameras together so they're synchronized, so that all the frames are looked at simultaneously and labeled simultaneously by one person, because we still need human labeling. So that at least they're not labeled at different times by different people in different ways, and then so it's sort of a surround picture. Then a very important part is to add the time dimension, so that you're looking at surround video, and you're labeling surround video, and this is actually quite difficult to do from a software standpoint. We had to write our own labeling tools, and then create an order labeling software to amplify the efficiency of human labelers, because it's quite hard to label video. In the beginning, it was taking several hours to label a 10-second video clip. This is not scalable.
Right.
So basically, what you have to have is you have to have surround video, and that surround video has to be primarily automatically labeled, with humans just being editors of and making slight corrections to the labeling of the video, and then feeding back those corrections into the future order labeler. So you get this flywheel eventually where the order labeler is able to take in vast amounts of video and with high accuracy automatically label the video for cars, lane lines, drive space.
What you're saying is that you think that, I mean, the result of this is that you're effectively giving the car a 3D model of the actual objects that are all around it. It knows what they are, and it knows how fast they are moving. And the remaining task is to predict what the quirky behaviors are. That when a pedestrian is walking down the road with a smaller pedestrian, that maybe that smaller pedestrian might do something unpredictable, or like things like that. You have to build into it before you can really call it safe.
You basically you need to have memory across time and space. So what I mean